Hello, everybody. How's it going? Welcome to a long overdue new Nightmare Wrestling podcast episode. I know it's been a very long time since I posted, but I am back. Um, there's been a lot of change um, going on since the last time, but I am back. And I think what I'm going to do is that I am going to not think. What I am going to do is I'm going to change the name of the podcast. I was never crazy about Nightmare Wrestling podcast. I just, couldn't think of something, and I wanted to set this up as soon as possible, and I just went with that name. Obviously, trolling, not trolling, but piggybacking off of Cody Rhodes. But I think I have a name in mind that I'm going to go with. So probably the next video or two will be under this name, and then I'll switch it over and I'll keep you posted on that. But a lot has gone on, obviously, since I last posted, and I was going to talk about Vince McMahon and John Laurinaitis, but I will table that and save that for a little bit later, because obviously today we got the news, the shocking news that R-Truth has been released from WWE. Now, in some ways, this is surprising, in other ways, it's not. Now, I think a lot of people would say, well, if Vince McMahon was still around, R-Truth would have had a job forever because Vince really liked him. Vince found him entertaining, and he always found a spot for truth. Why now? Things are different now. WWE is not WWE anymore, at least how we knew it. And the people who used to make those decisions are not there anymore. Now, the last set of releases that we got that included, Braun Strowman and Dakota Kai and Shayna Baszler, a lot of what was said out there in the internet was, well, those names wouldn't have been cut if Triple H didn't approve it, or Triple H wasn't okay with it. I don't know how much influence Triple H has. There might be some truth to it. So the question is, well, if Triple H saw Truth's name on there, why was he okay with letting Truth go? Did he not see value in Truth? Because apparently those Ron Cena t-shirts were selling very well. But let's look at R-Truth's position in the company, period. Truth was never the face of anything. Truth was never going to be WWE champion. Truth was a comedic act. Yes, he had, the United States. Remember, one of those was by accident because I believe he was facing Shinsuke and he didn't kick out. Shinsuke didn't kick out, so that's how he became. They always had him doing the goofy skits, the confused, oh, I thought I was in, the Money in the Bank match, but I'm not. Or, going into the Royal Rumble and looking for the ladder. Or going to the Royal Rumble thinking it's a tag match. All those funny things. That's what Truth was. And I think everybody was okay with that. And he was okay with that. There was a space for Truth. You could say he was mid card or lower card, but he was never going to be that guy. But he was a constant, if you know what I mean. He didn't need to be the face. He had that talent that he could just be a constant and be a present and be legendary without main eventing a WrestleMania, without, winning multiple Royal Rumbles. Truth carved out his own niche. So why, if this list or if this was floated or somebody said we're not going to renew the contract, why was Triple H okay with it? If he was okay with it. And, again, the powers that be might have said, listen, you have this guy's contract coming up. He's 53 years old. How much longer is he really going to go? Why are we paying him whatever we're paying him? Just let him go. And, that's a hard pill for fans to swallow if that's how the conversation. I think a little bit had to do with his age. And I think somebody did not see that Truth, even though at 53, still has value to WWE. And I don't think whoever made these decisions saw this. Now, again, if Triple H had a say in this, remember, Triple H is not dealing with Vince, not dealing with John Laurinaitis. Everybody's gone. The WWE as we knew it, that is gone. Okay? You have new execs, new people who may look at contracts differently. Clearly, the emotion factor was taken out because you see the outpouring, for R-Truth that he was let go. So they may be looking at this, the way they look at UFC contracts, or just on it as a business. They're looking at it differently than whereas Vince might have looked at it, and it's hard for fans to swallow if it's like, well, he's 53. Why are we? And I'm not saying this is the reason why, but I would assume this was part of the reason. He's 53 years old. Why are we paying him this? Or he's 53. He has no value. He brings nothing. Just let him go. And that's hard to say when we are hearing how much money or the TKO group is making. These $1 billion deals everywhere. You're like, well, you're telling me you can't keep this guy. This is why you got rid of people. Because obviously, as we saw, we let the last slew of people go. It was for budgeting reasons. And yes, we know after WrestleMania, they typically let people go. And some of those names I agreed with. Dakota Kai, to me, listen, call me a mark, call me whatever. To me, she's always hurt. Okay? Braun Strowman, he's always hurt. When they let Baron Corbin go, listen, they tried with him. He just wasn't connected. They let him go. In some ways, it's understandable why they let some people go because they're just not, connecting. I felt that the tag team, I can't, was it Kate and Ray or whatever her name was, her partner let her go. I felt they never really got a fair shake. We saw them a handful of times and then they disappeared. Shayna Baszler, I don't think should have let go. I think you could have brought her back to her NXT days. But then again, she's of a certain age. They probably felt, let her go. But I think, at least for those who look to these things and make these decisions, I think Truth's age played a huge part in it. Even though he doesn't look his age, I think that's what happened. That they just felt like, why are we doing this? And to me, if that's the thinking that they're going to be following, then to me, guys like AJ Styles, it would be surprised if they cut him at some point because, and yes, I know AJ just came back from, an injury a year ago or something like that. But to me, you can see the difference on how certain superstars have been used since Vince is gone. The biggest one, Austin Theory, dropped like a bad habit. To me, AJ Styles, his booking hasn't really been the same. But now look who has leveled up. Look at Damian Priest. Look at Drew McIntyre. Look at Seth Rollins. Really dominant presence. Look at the New Day. They pretty much disappeared for a while. And even when they became the heels, which to me is really not clicking, it seems like they really weren't being used the best. And now, now they're tag team champions. So is this Triple H driving this? Or is this somebody telling Triple H, this is what we want? But I was very surprised because I actually saw it on Facebook that they were letting R-Truth go. And there's a lot of crap on Facebook is crap. So I was like, is this real? And I started looking up, and sure enough, it was real that they're letting him go. Now, they're saying that they're not going to renew his contract, and then when his contract ends. So does that mean his contract ends at the end of the month? Does it end in another couple of days? Is he going to be on Raw? That's what I don't understand. So, will he get an opportunity to say goodbye to everybody? Which I highly doubt they're going to do. But the way I read it was that when his contract ends, they're not going to renew it. I would assume that's coming up relatively in a couple of days. I would assume, or they're just going to have him sit home until it's the end. So let's say his contract goes to the end of the month, they'll probably just have him sit home. It would be nice if they let him say goodbye. If we hear him rap one more time, just to have that joy that he brings, just have it one more time. And I've read that a lot of people now is like, if they let Truth go, none of us are saying, and that is true. And some of these guys just signed new contracts. I would not be surprised if some of them are going to go. Like Natalya just signed a contract. I would not be surprised this would be her last one. They're going to let her go after this, or they'll just cut her in the middle of it. But it sucks because again, you're making these $1 billion deals, whether it's with Netflix or USA, whenever you're making all these deals, you're telling me that you know, this is where the cuts have to be. And, I really don't post on Facebook, but I had posted something on Facebook responding to when they were talking about how broad everybody else got released. And one of the things that I put up was, I understand the whole bottom line, everything like that, but we always hear that the company has to make cuts and all this for whatever reason. But like I said to you guys, and I said in the post, it's really hard to accept that when we hear you're making $1 billion deals. But if you really need to cut things, do the execs take a pay cut? No, they keep their big bonuses. And my point is that if you're making these kind of deals, there are other places that you can cut first. It doesn't always have to be the people, but generally that's what it is. It's always the people that get cut first. But those execs, that nothing happens to them. And I can give you a great example. I used to work for the construction company, okay? And I'm an accountant. And I used to be and even though I wasn't the CFO, I was the controller. And I worked hand in hand with the CFO. And year end, it was time to do the bonuses and stuff like that. So I knew what everybody was getting, because what we would do is that we would get the full sheet from HR that would, had everybody's salary and all that kind of stuff. We would well, it was my job. I would divvy up the spreadsheet, so all the supers, they had belonged to the head super. All the, some of the, PMs would go to the certain exec that they were working with. The safety guys would go with the head safety. The accountants would go with, my boss. Everybody got their spreadsheet. They write what they feel like they want to give that person for their salary. Then it goes to the CEO, and then he will, which he often did, cut everybody except for his buddies. If you were somebody that if you were like his, pretty much his, lips were puckered on his ass, you were okay. And I would see him squabble over giving somebody $500. Now the one thing that I liked that my boss did was that, let's say you were a new hire, let's say you just came in June, or even if you came in October, and now it's December and we're getting ready, she would still include you. She would still give you a bonus. You may not get $5,000. She might give, depending on how soon. So if you started in June, she would probably say 1,500. If you started in like December, October, she would probably give you 500. But the point was that she was just trying to include you, and that was something that I liked. But I would watch this CEO sit there and squabble over, I'm not giving this person $500. You know, or let's say we gave him 5,000, we're gonna give him 4,500. What's the big deal about giving him the 500? But he would cut it, and I watch him do all this other stuff, and it's like, okay. But in March is when they would get their executive bonuses. It was called EIP, Executive Incentive Pay, I think it was called. And him and a few other execs were in the program. But meanwhile, even though we're doing the bonuses, I always heard, it's going to be a tough year. I'm not sure. We didn't really hit the number, or we struggled to hit the number, whatever. Or the outlook, we're not sure. We're not sure what 2020, 3 and 4 and 5 is going to bring. All this stuff. Okay, but so if you're concerned about that, this is why you're chopping up everybody's bonuses. But in March, I would see what you guys were getting. Did any of those execs raise their hand and say, okay, because we're not so sure, maybe we should all share in this bonus being cut thing, my $250,000 bonus that I have, let's chop it down. So, do you think that happened? No. Do you think they all said, you know what? This exec got 100,000, and I'm not bullshitting these numbers. Okay, this is what these people were getting: 250, 125, 300, or something. This is what these guys were getting, and yes, this was before any kind of taxes was taken out. Okay, this is what these guys were getting. And do you think they said, well, okay, listen, our staff, my team, or whatever, really worked really hard. Okay, I heard that you couldn't give this person 5,000. You know what? Take two. And in fairness, I know a lot of people probably wouldn't do that anyway. But my point is that my point is that they will make all these excuses of why we can't, but yet you can like you're not going to share in the pain, pretty much, and you'll sit there and lay people off, knowing, okay, well, I got my 250. Well, then okay, we can let that person go, because if there was fear of that, everybody to me should share into that fear. Another example is that when COVID happened, we all had to take a pay cut, and I believe it was for the staff it was 20%, and for the exec it was 30%. And if COVID had continued longer, we would have went to 30, because we were 20, we were 20, they were 30. And if it continued, we would have went to 30 and they would have took 40 if the shutdown had lasted, because I think things slowly started to reopen. I think in June they opened up a few things, or they kind of relaxed, not a lot, but they relaxed like a few things, and then we were able to, to go back and all that kind of stuff. So that's why I kind of related, and I felt bad that yes, I know these guys are making millions of dollars and stuff like that, but again, when you're making all that money as a company, and I know there's insurance and all this other stuff that has to get paid out, that eventually gets down to your bottom line. But again, if we're hearing all of this, why is it that you telling me you can't cut someplace else? And I'm not gonna lie, most people would not want to sacrifice their salary, sacrifice their bonus. Now, you may say, okay, you know what, dude, you're full of shit. But I even offered one time, because the girl who sat next to me, and we're very close friends today, you know, he was sort of pussyfooting around giving her a certain number. And even my boss was like, but she worked really, really hard and she earned it. And I even said to my boss, I said, listen, and she was one of the ones that she was chopped, that he was complaining about the 500. And I even said to my boss, listen, if you want to cut me 500 and give it to her, I'm fine with it. You can do that. Because she really did deserve the number that my boss put in there. Because we all struggled that year, and we all like put in the effort to do that, and she really stepped up, because she was somebody who really didn't have the training, didn't really know, really took the time to learn and figure stuff out. I thought she should have gotten a little something, something. Ultimately, my boss was able to get her what she needed, and that didn't happen. And I like I said, I get that most people would not be like, I'm not giving my bonus to somebody else, and I'm not cutting my bonus, even if I worked hard to get to like this executive level. But it's so hard to accept that. And obviously, they're not going to say to us, well, R-Truth got booted out because of his age, because that's age discrimination. But I think that is what was in somebody's mind, is that this guy is 53 years old. He is not a Seth Rollins. He is not a Roman Reigns. He is not a face of the company. He never was, never will be. Why are we holding on to him? And it seems like there was nobody there to advocate for him. Now, on one hand, Truth may be okay with it. I mean, I know he has. I think he has 6 kids. Um, I think he has 5 or 6 kids. And at this point, I'm sure a lot of his kids, I'm sure they're all grown up. They probably already graduated college. But I'm sure his wife would like to have him back home. And who's to say that R-Truth is like, you know what? I was going to ride this horse until it ran out. I've ridden it. It's time for me to go. He might have been okay. And who's to say that R-Truth probably would have retired by the time his contract, you know, expired? We don't know where R-Truth heads at. I mean, clearly, I think he was taken aback by reading his post that they did release him. But who is to say that at the end he probably would have said, you know what, let's do one more, or just whatever. It's just surprising that they just let him go. And when somebody is like the heart and soul, like when you have that heart and soul of the office, and you find out they're getting let go, that's rough. You know, especially when you were tight with a lot of people, that affects a lot. That doesn't just obviously it affects R-Truth, but it affects everybody in the back who enjoy seeing him who enjoy being around him. You know, like Kevin Owens, when he comes back, our Truth is not going to be there. Wherever Randy Orton, he's not going to be. And I'm sure if Randy Orton knew, Randy would have fought for him because Truth said that that's why Truth got back into WWE in the first place was because I think Umaga and Randy like pulled for him to be brought back. But I don't think anybody should be surprised going forward when we see certain names are going to be let go because this is a different animal now. This is not Vince McMahon. These are different people, and these are people who are thinking about the dollar signs and not thinking about the person. And I'm telling you, certain people, I don't know how much longer they're going to be around. I have a few people in my head that I think by the end of the year will be gone. If they're not gone by the end of the year, they'll be gone next year after WrestleMania. So I would pay closer attention to how people are being number one used, number one, um, and also their durability. You know, look at the guys in the War Raiders. How many times have they been hurt? And now they're healthy right now. But you know what? Somebody might say, "Oh God, this guy's hurt again." You know what? Just bounce them. That's it. They've had their run. Give it to them. You know, I mean, some people I think right now are safe. Like obviously, Braun Breaking just started. You know, Bronson Reed. Obviously, you know, I think those guys are safe. But now I wonder, guys like Tamatonga. You know, him and his brother are both hurt. And you know, where's the storyline going where he fits in? Because it looks like we're going to see the separation of Jacob Fatu and Solo Sokoa. So now will it be Solo, JC Mato, and the two brothers? But what are they going to do? Who are they going to feud with? You know, the Bloodline storyline is effectively over. Who are they going to feud with? So, it all comes down to money now. And these people, all they want to do is make money and raise that stock price. And, say what you want about Vince. I never got the sense, even through Vince's actions, that Vince cared about the stock price. But I think these new people who are in charge is like, we got to make sure we keep that stock price going. We got to do things to make sure our balance sheet is good. If that means cutting people, we're just going to cut people. But it just stings a little bit more because of who it was. I think they could have had a conversation with R-Truth and just said, we're not going to renew the contract. We're going to let it run out. And, if you want to publicly go and say goodbye, listen, we didn't come to an agreement. I love y'all. I'm 53 years old. I think it is time for me to sort of be home now, be a husband, maybe be a grandfather, maybe has grandkids. I don't know. But R-Truth, this whole situation, I think, could have been handled a lot better. Now, maybe a lot of the backlash will help and maybe it'll bring them back. I don't know. I kind of doubt that, but they could have handled this better. There are just some people that this is not how you do things. There are some people who deserve a bit more respect. With Shayna Baszler and Dakota Kai, were they there when they should have been allowed to say goodbye? I don't think they were there. I don't think they had that clout. But people like a Randy Orton, even a Sheamus, if he wants to say goodbye one day, they deserve that opportunity to say goodbye, a proper goodbye to the fans. Cena is not Cena anymore. So, if Cena had that pull, he probably would have been like, no, don't let this guy go. What are you guys doing? But now, I don't think these guys and girls have somebody to advocate for them like that. And it's so different now where, people like Randy, he was out, then he came back, he had his program, now he's out again. Maybe if he was there, maybe if he knew what was going on, maybe he's talking to somebody now. I don't know. But even I don't think Randy has that clout. I think if this was, 10 years ago where John Cena was on top, he probably could have did it. Maybe even Roman Reigns was around, he probably could have been like, no, keep this guy around, you know. But who has that clout right now? You know, maybe Seth has it, but that's probably with Triple H. That's probably not with the TKO people or whoever is reviewing the contracts and said, let this person go. And again, it's probably somebody who's like a numbers person, and people who are numbers people, not all of them, but you have people who are numbers people who are just like, punch numbers and like, oh, okay, yep, cut this, cut that, you got to cut this, okay, get rid of that, get rid of it. You don't look at what's on the other side of it. I don't know R-Truth's financial situation, but he seemed like a pretty smart guy, so I'm quite sure he was very good with his money since he had a large family to take care of. I highly doubt he was stupid with his money. And I'm highly sure that if we never see R-Truth again, which I believe we will, they'll probably bring him back for one-time appearances. I don't think he is hurting for money. I think he will have a very comfortable retirement if he decides to retire. Could he pop up at AEW? Who knows? Could he pop up at TNA? Who knows? I don't know. But I don't know if he popped up anywhere else. I don't know if that comedy and the love that everybody has for him will be replicated and be able to be followed. And I don't know if R-Truth will even want to, in a sense, start over. The audience of AEW is different than WWE. I would have said different from TNA, but as you can see now, we sort of blended those audiences. And, this is also what happens when, you have these mergers or you're bought out or whatnot. The new people in charge make a lot of changes. And I feel like, in a way, now we're starting to feel those changes because just the vibe and the feel of things don't feel the way they were like right after Vince left. It's like now people from TKO, I think the non WWE people, I think now they're starting to stick their claws in things. And I think that's why I feel the vibe of the shows, they just feel different. Not because Jey Uso is champion. I just think Raw feels different. Like even the build up to WrestleMania, like I'm always like pumped and excited for WrestleMania. I really felt this WrestleMania, at least the build up, I felt was lackluster, man. I really felt it was lackluster. Like there was just like no excitement for me. You know, it's just what I mean. Was some of the matches good? Yeah, but I was not as pumped as I usually am. Even the Royal Rumble, I wasn't as pumped for the Royal Rumble. And I'm like, something has changed. Like SmackDown doesn't like have that feeling of the excitement that you want to see. I don't know. It just, I just feel like the TKO people are really starting to take over, and that does make me a little nervous. You know, I have had a love hate relationship with WWE probably for the past 10 years, maybe a little bit longer, because it's like, oh my God, this is what you guys are doing. All right, this is boring. But then they would always do something to pull me back in. And I probably couldn't imagine a day because I've been watching wrestling for so long that I never thought I would stop watching it altogether. What before I would like DVR it, just kind of like fast forward through it, but like I still had a general idea. But I think if TKO really gets their hooks in and things just really become so bland and boring, I think I'm gonna stop. I'll probably stop watching. It's just that excitement is just not there. And if you're going to start ripping out the fans' hearts by releasing beloved figures in WWE, I don't know. I mean, look how long the Wyatt Six was out. And, it's because they probably didn't know what the hell to do with them. I mean, their storyline with American Made wasn't that great because they probably didn't know what to do with them. So, I'm sorry about R-Truth. It's disappointing. And obviously, we just heard that Carlito was let go too, but they weren't doing anything with Carlito. You know, how many matches he's had since he's been there? And I know Carlito's supposed to be sort of like the comedic act for Judgment Day, but they weren't doing anything with Carlito. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I don't know why. Again, if it was passed through Triple H, why Triple H was okay with it. And then again, also, guys, sometimes you got to pick your battles, and maybe this R-Truth wasn't worth having a battle for, because maybe listen, we're not there, we're not back there, so maybe Triple H knows something we don't know, and he was like, you know what, something else is going to come down the pike, and this is the one I'm going to fight for. Because remember, Triple H ain't safe either. They could one day say, you know what, Triple H, we want you out of here. We can find somebody else to do this. Nobody's safe because it's not a family business anymore. It's not a family company anymore. So nobody is safe. I mean, hell, we could wake up one day and they could say Roman Reigns is gone. Which sounds crazy, but nobody is safe. And I think now we're starting to feel the effects and see the effects of this merger. Sometimes you'll get it where it's like, okay, listen, we're gonna buy you, we're gonna merge, we're gonna put this board together, but you know what? We're not, part of this industry, so we're gonna let you run it. But then somebody's gonna get the ego and be like, you know what? Oh, they should have did this and that, and then somebody's gonna get involved. When it happened with my company, when we were, bought by somebody else, they said the same thing. We're going to leave you alone. And to some degree, they have, or they did. But now I'm not there, but I still have people there. Now they're starting to dig their hands in and dictate, software, which could be understood. You want everybody to be in the same thing. But they're pushing now all their entities into doing certain things now. Whereas, he said we're going to back off. But what did they do? They backed off. They observed for however long they observed for. And now it's like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And that's what's happening to me in WWE right now. TKO, the UFC guys, they stood back. They said, okay, let's see what's going on. Okay, this is what we want to do. And like I said, there's a change there. Something just doesn't feel like it felt before. I think about WrestleMania 40, and some say it was a little convoluted, all that kind of stuff, but they did a good job building that excitement. There was an excitement for WrestleMania 40. I didn't feel that for 41. Didn't feel it. It's disappointing. So, hopefully, we'll be able to see a little bit more of R-Truth, again, sporadically. We'll see. Maybe there could be enough of an outcry that they bring him back. I don't know. But it's sad. And he is definitely one of the good ones. Definitely one of the good ones. I'm going to miss seeing him. Listen, we all know at some point these guys are going to go away. I love The Undertaker. We knew at some point, I knew he was going to disappear. I loved Kane. I knew at some point Kane was going to retire. I look at some of these old videos. I listen to how JR would go crazy over Stone Cold or Batista or Shawn Michaels. All the people that I grew up with are pretty much all gone. Or they're either retired or sadly they're dead. But I look back with a smile, like, oh man, that was funny. And you kind of appreciate it more now because you probably didn't like maybe like get everything when you were watching it as a kid. But there was going to be a time where R-Truth was gonna go. But again, he was one of those. He was in that echelon of Shawn Michaels, John Cena, The Undertaker, of getting a proper goodbye. Undertaker's character didn't get a proper goodbye because it was still during COVID and he had to say goodbye in the Thunderdome. But his real goodbye was in front of people in the Hall of Fame. And as he himself has said, he got his closure at WrestleMania. He feels he got his full closure at WrestleMania 40. You know, after WrestleMania 26, Shawn Michaels got to say his goodbye. Ric Flair got his, what we then thought, got his goodbye. John Cena's getting his goodbye now. And I'm sure in his last match, they're going to give him some time to really say goodbye to everybody. If it's not after the match, maybe he'll come back the next night on Raw and say what he's going to say. R-Truth was in there. R-Truth, again, he may not have been the face of the company, he may not have been a multi-time champion, he may not have been like Shawn Michaels to win the first of every new match, but damn it, the love and the respect that he had from his peers and his fans gives him that, I'm going to say, right to go out to really, truly say goodbye. Hopefully they let him do that tomorrow. Hopefully they do. Hopefully they will just let him come and say, listen, guys, I know you saw what happened, and whatever. Hopefully they do. I don't think they will, but I hope. I hope. And there's going to be interviews, obviously, and we'll get like the whole story. I truly believe if I'm putting myself in R-Truth's shoes, I truly feel that he was shocked, but I think a little bit he might be a little happy. Might be a little happy because it's like, you know what? I could be home with my family now. That passion I give to everybody else, I can give it full time to my family. And like I said, I don't know how old his kids are. I'm sure the majority of his kids are all grown up, and some of them may have their own kids. I don't know if he's a grandfather or not. I don't know. But if he is a grandfather, he can spend a lot more time with his grandkids. He can be around his family. And, maybe his family will be happy because, listen, the fans, the world has had you for all these years. Now it's our turn to have you. So we don't know. He could, in the inside, be a little happy. Or maybe he thought, you know what, I thought I could squeak out another year or two before I said goodbye. But it's coming a little bit earlier. But I'm sure, like his post said, I'm sure he's filled with happiness. I'm sure he enjoyed the last 17 years. I'm sure he did. Of course he did. And, I'm sure he's disappointed, but it probably is a little hard for him to be upset because, Truth is a smart guy. He probably figured, my age and all this other kind of stuff, and you got these new guys coming up and where I fit in, all this other kind of stuff. He probably knew the end was coming, but just probably wanted to end to be more on his terms. So, thanks, R-Truth, for the memories. Little Jimmy. Um, yeah, and it's really sad that this is how it's ending, and I truly hope he gets the right opportunity to say goodbye. But I know it's been a long time, guys. Thank you for coming back. Thanks for listening to this new episode. Um, I'm going to come back to talk about Vince McMahon and Laurinaitis. Obviously, we've heard that Laurinaitis is going to essentially flip on McMahon, but I'll get into that more. Hopefully, you enjoyed this podcast and leave me your thoughts on what you think about R-Truth being let go.